All right, thank you all for being here today to advocate for improving our physician shortage in the state of Idaho. Today, our focus is to save the Idaho WWAMI program, which has been our state's public medical school for over 50 years. I want to extend my warmest welcome to my fellow WWAMI alumni and also our current trainees who really represent the future of medicine here in the state of Idaho. I also want to welcome my fellow doctors who are here because you're so important to teaching these WWAMI students. And lastly, I want to thank all of the citizens of Idaho who've shown up here today just because you know how important it is to make sure we have access to healthcare and access to the doctors that take care of you. My name is Dr. Andrea Christopher. I am an internal medicine specialist. My research focuses on improving access to healthcare, and I am one of the 635 doctors across the state of Idaho who trains WWAMI students into becoming doctors one day. I have the honor of supervising 35 third-year medical students when they come to my hospital to rotate for their 3-month internal medicine clerkship. When I first took this role 8 years ago, we could only take 24 students. Today, we can take 35. I, just like all other physician educators across this state, am committed to continual growth of our education programs in order to address the Idaho physician shortage. You already know about this shortage, like when you make an appointment to go see a new doctor and the wait list is 6 to 8 months. This is just not acceptable for my patients or anybody here in the state of Idaho. That's why WWAMI is committed to fixing this, and I have personally dedicated my career to improving the access to healthcare in this state, which I know is true for so many of my colleagues who've all shown up here today, and also the colleagues that cannot be here right now, because they are currently working to see patients in the hospitals, in the clinics, in the emergency departments, and in the nursing homes across the state. WWAMI has been Idaho's medical school for more than 5 decades. WWAMI is an acronym that stands for the collaboration between Wyoming, Washington, Alaska, Montana, and Idaho in order to train physicians to serve the communities across what amounts to nearly a quarter of the USA landmass. WWAMI has graduated hundreds of doctors who are equipped to meet the medical needs of our communities and who are also joined every year by folks who choose Idaho over every other WWAMI state. House Bill 176 proposes to defund the WWAMI program and investigate other options. And this is why we're here today, to be able to explain that we cannot disrupt our physician training pipeline at a time when we desperately need more physicians here in the state of Idaho. You can see the commitment of the entire Idaho WWAMI community in this room and in all of the public support that's been coming in with daily letters and phone calls to legislators. Building the program we have today took literally more than 50 years, and that involved relationship building, trust, and commitment from Idahoans across the state. This is a deeply complex and continually evolving program and problem, and there's no conceivable way to lift and shift this work in 24 months as this bill suggests. This is why we're asking instead for a collaborative approach with our community of physicians, physician educators, and Idaho citizens across the state. I'm going to introduce our guests who will be sharing their own personal narratives about why WWAMI is Idaho and needs to be protected. First up is Dr. Mark Uranga, a pediatrician.
Thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Mark Uranga, a local pediatrician in Boise, Idaho. 4th generation Idahoan, WWAMI graduate, and currently a clinical instructor for WWAMI. The best way for me to think about WWAMI is as a sheep herder driving a flock of sheep across the foothills. Like a band of sheep, these people who are educating our future doctors need just one resolute leader to head us in the right direction. While this may be a peaceful scene, it is not something that happens without effort. If that sheep herder is lost, the band is going to scatter, and you're going to have heck to pay to bring it back together. The 635 clinical instructors of WWAMI are not going to be guaranteed to be there in the future. I volunteer as a clinical preceptor to help repay the investment made in me when I was a WWAMI student 24 years ago. As a clinical instructor, I volunteer my time. Every half day I spend with a medical student is essentially an hour that I choose not to spend with my family or my patients. This dedication is something I don't take lightly. I won't volunteer my time for a for-profit institution with an unproven track record. I volunteer my time because of the track record of WWAMI. In my own experience, I've worked with students who come from different institutions. I've worked hard to train them and see them go to parts unknown, to practice in ways that don't help our community. The students that I've taught in WWAMI are standing here, some of them today, with intention to practice in the state of Idaho. And for that reason, I continue to dedicate my clinical time to WWAMI. If we lose that shepherding role of the WWAMI institution, these clinical preceptors will not come back at a whim. I have other ways to spend my time. My patients could be there for 2 more hours and more every day. But the dedication that I have is based upon the track record of WWAMI and our opportunity to improve the physician shortage. And this is the best way to do that. If we lose clinical preceptors like me, we lose the opportunity to teach medical students how we practice medicine in our state, how we see patients, how we slow down and talk to those families who are struggling every day. In an academic setting, residents and fellows are not at the same level of training as an attending physician that our medical students get to train with. They get to learn at the elbows of people that have been practicing day in and day out, taking care of families in our state. And this love of patient care is contagious. It's what brings our medical students home as residents and later as your doctors. Yeah. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Joseph Homestead, a family physician in training, and here is Dr. Homestead.
Dr. Reagan.
Thank you, everybody. So my name's Joseph Homestead. I'm an Idaho native. I'm from Middleton. My parents, they own a farm out north of Purple Sage. We raise llamas. I'm also a family medicine resident right now at the Caldwell Family Medicine Residency. And I'm a recent graduate of the Idaho WWAMI program. So when I finished residency, I've had a spot picked out since I was a junior in high school that I'm going to open up a clinic right in Middleton, my hometown. And I had the chance to attend other medical schools, but I declined them because I wanted to stay in Idaho and because WWAMI trains some of the best doctors in the world. And that actually is no exaggeration. The WWAMI program is the best primary care training in the United States, full stop. So when I applied for residency, program directors for residencies, they told me point blank that they put their WWAMI students on the top of the pile. And there's a good reason for that. So I helped pull bullets out of chest walls and under glaring lights in the #1 trauma center in the United States. I also got to go to Alaskan fishing villages and pull fish hooks out of people's arms and legs in rural Alaska. And with all of that to round out my training, I still got to spend most of my time right here in the great state of Idaho with the best and the brightest doctors in the state, rubbing shoulders with them, building relationships with them, that ultimately led me to residency right here in the state. And that training, it didn't come from my time in Moscow, because we have 18 months in Moscow, and that is great. I enjoyed the faculty and my time there. But that degree of training was only possible because of the partnerships that WWAMI has built up for decades with the doctors here. And the kinds of relationships where students are valued, included, and respected. And building those relationships is hard. It takes a lot of time, and they exist on a goodwill and a prayer. And no other medical school has the kind of regional network to even attempt something on the scale of WWAMI. If we break ties with UW, it will break the WWAMI program. The clinical phase of our education, which is the meat of our education, the most vital phase, will be decimated. And the students that will end up doing their rotations elsewhere, outside of Idaho. And unlike me, who was able to spend most of my time right here in this great state, I got to be here for my nephew's birthdays. When my dad threw his back out at the farm, guess who took over duties? I helped my brother build his house. I saw and treated my friends and my neighbors in the hospitals that I grew up visiting. And on another personal note, little BYU Idaho Joseph never would have had a chance of attending an institution of the caliber of WWAMI if it were not for this program. One of my really good friends who's at a very top tier institution in the state of Texas, who also had the opportunity to attend many, many different medical schools, he called me. He said, I wish that I was from Idaho so that I could have had the chance to attend University of Washington like you. My message to Idaho legislators is this: do not take that away from us. Thank you. And next, I'd like to introduce Marnie Ellis, who is a writer and a resident of Idaho for more than 3 decades and is a parent of a current WWAMI student.
Good afternoon. My name is Marnie Ellis, and I am not a doctor. I am, however, an Idaho resident of over 30 years and a parent of a current WWAMI medical student. My daughter, Miranda Ellis, is a second-year student in the Idaho WWAMI program. She would be here today if she weren't deep in preparation for her Step 1 board exams, a critical milestone in her journey to becoming a physician who will serve Idaho families. Miranda is a proud graduate of Boise High School, raised in a middle-class Idaho family. Her path to medicine has been shaped by a commitment to service in Idaho and around the world. In her years leading up to medical school, she studied food insecurity and public health. She lived with farmers in Malawi, learning firsthand about the connection between agriculture, nutrition, and health. She spent 6 months in Sierra Leone working shoulder to shoulder with healthcare professionals in some of the most impoverished communities on the planet. Here in Idaho, Miranda worked alongside physicians for 2 years in the emergency department at St. Alphonsus Regional Medical Center. She's volunteered at numerous health outreach events and served as an AmeriCorps community health worker. Just last month, she joined Idaho doctors on a medical mission in Honduras. Next month, she begins her clinical rotation serving community members in Blackfoot, Pocatello, and Boise. These WWAMI partnerships will be instrumental in preparing her to practice in Idaho and deepen her commitment to serving our state. Because of her hard work, Miranda had options for medical school. but she chose the Idaho WWAMI program for two primary reasons. It offers an excellent medical education at a school consistently ranked in the top 20 in the nation and #1 in primary care and rural medicine. And it allows her to stay connected to Idaho, to train with Idaho physicians and mentors she hopes to practice alongside after residency. Without WWAMI, Miranda would have had no choice but to leave the state to pursue her dream of becoming a doctor. Idaho desperately needs more well-trained physicians to care for our families. Eliminating WWAMI introduces even more uncertainty at a time when Idaho's physician shortage is already at critical levels. It will push dedicated students like Miranda out of state, making it even harder to bring them back. I urge you to work together with the WWAMI leaders and graduates to expand medical education, instead of dismantling an essential program that has provided Idaho with so many homegrown, exceptional doctors. Thank you.
In closing, I want to thank Drs. Uranga, Dr. Homestead, and Ms. Ellis for sharing their stories with us. And I call on this community, and I call on our legislators to remember that WWAMI is Idaho and will always be part of Idaho. Our public medical school has an incredible legacy of training doctors in Idaho for the last 50 years. This includes the pediatrician who took care of your baby when they came in sick. This includes the geriatrician who's taking care of your grandpa when he's starting to have memory issues. And this also includes the trauma surgeon not too far from here who's taking care of your friend when they had to have surgery after a big car accident. This is more than us just loving our educational experience. This is us loving the state. This is us loving the people who live here. We took the Hippocratic Oath, and this is us living that, to do no harm and asking the legislature to consider the harm they'll bring to our medical education system without a full and thoughtful transition plan. Thank you all for taking time out of your very busy schedules today to be here with us. And please, save WWAMI. Thank you. I will now open the floor for questions for me or any of our other speakers from today, if there are any questions.
What's the risk of the legislature exploring other options for medicals? What do we do in the meantime?
So the risk of exploring other options without having... Oh, sorry?
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry, thank you. The question was, what is the risk of the legislature exploring other options to explore medical training in the state? We certainly want to partner with our legislators towards growing the medical training opportunities, whether that's partnering with other schools, bringing in more opportunities to train physicians here for our state. What we're most concerned about is the current bill and the current efforts to defund the existing program, transition in only a 24-month window, simply will devastate the current training pipeline in our state at a time when we simply do not have any bandwidth or any give, because we already have a physician shortage ranking 50th in the country in terms of physicians per capita.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Can you touch a little bit more on the rural Idaho communities and maybe why a switch would impact?
So if you want to take this question, remember to repeat it first.
Sorry, it's water. So the question was if we can touch a little bit more on the rural Idaho communities and how this switch would impact rural Idaho communities. And right now, we have a network of WWAMI physicians that spans the state, from everywhere from Cottonwood to Grangeville to Orofino to Malad, Idaho. We have, across the state, we have this network of preceptors that has been built over decades. And right now, I got to spend my time in Cottonwood, Idaho. Some of my classmates got to spend time in Montpelier, Idaho. And right now, I know people for certain who have signed contracts already to go back to those places as part of the WWAMI program. And I believe it would absolutely decimate some of the pipeline directly to those rural places if we got rid of the WWAMI program.
Is it potential that those partnerships won't be there if you guys go into different programs?
Yes, and I think Dr. Uranga expressed that very eloquently. And what's that?
We can let
Yeah, Dr. Uranga can speak more to that.
Thank you. Having experienced not yet the spectrum towards retirement, but relatively full spectrum of experience in WWAMI, the engagement that people have is an engagement with the institution and the people that come with that institution. You can't recreate those relationships, even with money, but you can maintain the ones that you have and engage future expansion. But to break something and allow something to scatter, it will not come back in the same way. There's no doubt. Those people that are willing to take their time in Montpelier and McCall and elsewhere have many, many ways to spend their time and many, many loyalties. A central part of their professional loyalty is to WWAMI, and that is not something that can be recreated.
You mentioned being already at the bottom of the list when it comes to the amount of positions we have. Going with a new program, is that maybe going to get worse? What are we maybe looking at if the switch does happen?
One of the biggest uncertainties about a switch is the return on investment. When you have a track record of proven returns of people that have trained and come back, what you can establish is that the culture of that institution is bringing people back. There are many opportunities for trainees to set up their own experiences and these sorts of things, but those are all really labor intensive, and they don't have the same built-in network of education and professional engagement and then future employment that WWAMI have. Yeah.
As the people who are training the students coming through this program, what would be some of your specific concerns if it were to shift from UW to university and the changes that might come?
So the question is, what specific concerns do we have if the relationship is terminated with the WWAMI program and shifted to a different medical school? And in particular, you're talking about the University of Utah, so I'll speak towards that, but also just more broadly. The big concern around termination of a program that exists, one, is the timeline. As we've talked about, the process of building relationships to build a network of physicians in rural communities who can train the next generation of physicians takes decades. But it also has a pipeline that we can show is proven with 50 to 70% of the trainees coming back to practice here in the state. The second issue has to do with the fact that why get rid of a program that's working so well for us with such an incredible retention rate? We're certainly open to the idea of exploring relationships with other places that will help us bring more medical training opportunities to the state, but work with us so that we can help. You know, this is a very complex process, physician training, and so let us have the opportunity to help shape that.
Could you tell us how many students come out of WWAMI a year, and how many students we might be putting into a different school per year? Are the other schools already full, or do we get on a wait list? How is that going to work?
Thanks for that. The question is, how many students do we take right now? And what would happen trying to shift them, or what are the capacities at other programs? Right now, in the state of Idaho, we take 40 Idaho students to come to medical school every year. The problem with us being able to grow, because we would like to be able to keep pushing to grow as many more training spots as we can. I know the legislature has tried to support us growing to 50, is that we don't have enough high quality training sites for the physicians and the student doctors. So what I mean by that is, For example, I've been at this job for 8 years, trying to increase, from 24 students to 34 students. I think it'll take me another 5 to 10 years worth of working with community partners to be able to train up the doctors to train the students. Similarly, here in the state of Idaho, for WWAMI, we have about 16 spots for psychiatry, for training our mental health specialists. Again, we just don't have enough spots to expand so easily. As of right now, the University of Utah does have some students who are supported by our state to study, around 10 students. They only spend 6 to 8 weeks of their entire medical school training in the state of Idaho, compared to the Idaho students who can spend all 4 years here.
Wow.
Similarly, other medical schools are not able to find enough training sites here in Idaho and send their medical students to other states, such as the Dakotas, such as Montana, such as New York, such as Florida. We've built relationships here in the state of Idaho such that we can try and take as many students as we can. So the problem is not that WWAMI is not trying to fulfill its end of the bargain to increase spots. The problem is we need more time to build those relationships and training sites.
Going to the UW, is anyone concerned not being affiliated with UW after this might potentially harm the jobs, or what's the recognition of UW that will?
Yeah, I will. So, as I said, when I applied for residency recently, I had program directors tell me point blank that they would take all of their WWAMI applicants and they put them right at the top of the pile. It is an enormous, I don't think people outside of the medical world truly realize this, but the University of Washington is a very prestigious medical organization, on par with any of the Ivy League institutions. And the ability, like I said, my friend who's at a prestigious school in Texas, for him to say, I can't believe that you go to the University of Washington, I'm jealous, it's huge. It is a huge boon to our, not only our folks who want to go into primary care and have the cream of the crop in terms of applying for residency programs, but also people who want to apply for specialty positions and who we know have a track record of coming back to the state of Idaho as specialist physicians, which we need a lot more of as well.
We are happy to set up one-on-one interviews with any of our speakers and others. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to everybody who came today. Let's give another big round of applause for the